Hey everyone! So we had a bit of a technical glitch when I recorded it previously. So I am re-recording my Fireside chat, not Fireside. And today we are talking about autism and intimacy because I find that that is a topic that doesn't get talked about a lot, and turns out autistic children grow up to be autistic adults. And a lot of us end up having adult relationships. And before we get to that point, we often have relationships along the way as teenagers. So I think it's really important to be able to talk about it. In that vein, I also think it's really important to be able to have those kinds of conversations with your kids. I think one of the most important things about parenting is being able to talk to your kids about anything, because when they have a problem, you want them to come to you. You don't want them going to their friends or to other people. You want them to come to you. And the only way they're going to come to you is if you are available to talk to them about any subject without judgment. And the without judgment part is key, because when kids feel like we are placing judgment on them, they are less likely to talk to us. So a lot of times when we have those kinds of conversations in our house, I try to stick to logical explanations, factual things, just kind of throwing the facts out there and then talking through, well, how does this go? Like, what's the consequences of these choices? Are they good? Are there negatives? Are there things to be aware of? Are there things you're not thinking about? Any of those kinds of things. And that's just, I think, in general, good for parenting in general. But it's really important that we talk about those kinds of things, especially when it comes to intimate relationships, so that our kids have knowledge. Autistic kids, generally speaking, we do not do well with euphemisms. We do not do well with beating around the bush. We need people to be straightforward with us and give us factual information so that we can make good life choices that are well informed. And a lot of times, especially when it comes to talking about intimacy with kids or teenagers or your adult children, a lot of times those are conversations that we find uncomfortable. And so because of that, we very often will try to use euphemisms and beat around the bush, and then our kids end up just really confused. You know, you need to be specific, and be willing to answer any questions they have, and maybe even foresee some of the questions that they have. The other thing I have found that really helps to be able to have these conversations is, instead of making it some big, we're going on a mom and teenager date and we're going to talk about this thing that we can't talk about anywhere else. That makes it kind of intimidating, because all of a sudden it's this big thing. The pressure goes up. So being able to just have open conversations in your home without having to make it a big deal can be really helpful. You might want to choose your setting. I mean, the grocery store is probably not the best place to have those kinds of conversations. Privacy of your own home is a better place to have those conversations with your kid. And there may be certain times in your home that are not appropriate, and that's totally fine. But you don't want to make it out to be this big, scary, thing where, oh my goodness, we're going to sit down and have a serious conversation. This is some kind of big milestone or something like that. That doesn't help. Another thing to think about, and this is also generally just important, you need to, as you're growing up, you want to start thinking about your own sensory needs. So what kind of sensory needs do you have? What are your preferences? A lot of people don't know, especially I find autistic people. We sometimes forget, we're not aware. I remember I was asked one time, how does your body feel when you're anxious? And I had no idea. I spent so much time watching other people when they were anxious that I never thought about how I felt when I was anxious. So that's something that's important to help our kids learn to think about, because at some point they will hopefully have a relationship where somebody will ask them, like, what do you like? What's comfortable for you? Or even something as simple as, like, do you need a lot of alone time, or do you enjoy spending lots of time interacting with lots of people? Like, what are your general preferences? And I think, yes, it's important in public situations, but it's especially important in private situations, because private situations are where we are supposed to be most comfortable in our own skin, being ourselves. And that's even more important in intimate settings, because you're getting into another person's space and they're getting into your space at a level that is unlike most other settings. So I think it's really important to try to bring awareness to preferences, especially sensory preferences, and to be able to have those conversations. And being able to have those conversations with a partner starts out with how we talk about those subjects with our kids as parents. Because if they feel comfortable talking about it with us in our homes, then they were more likely to feel comfortable having those conversations with a trusted partner at some point. I find that a lot of times autistic teenagers, at least in my experience, are less likely to be interested in relationships and, like, intimacy especially. And I think a lot of that is because autistic kids tend to be 2 years behind in general. So a lot of times when the other kids are starting to get into some of that kind of stuff, we're not interested yet, which is great, because by the time all the other kids have kind of sorted themselves out and there's less drama going on, then we come along and it's much easier because there's a whole lot less drama to deal with. So, I mean, there's pluses and minuses. But I think that it works pretty well. You just have to be aware of the fact that a lot of us tend to be a little bit delayed in those kinds of things. It's not that we won't get there, it's just we take longer to get there, I guess, because of our delayed development. I also think it's really helpful when you're thinking about that, to realize that it's a bit of a form of self-preservation, because if you're easily manipulated or you're developmentally delayed and you don't have some of the knowledge and stuff that other people have, then being a little bit more delayed, a little bit more cautious, that kind of thing, can really make a big difference. It allows us to be able to protect ourselves in a way. It's like a form of self-preservation. So if you are in a trusted relationship, then you might feel more secure. But if you're not in a trusted relationship, then in my experience, most autistic kids are very uninterested. And I think that a lot of that is because of the risk factor that goes along with being autistic and interacting with other people. So those are some thoughts. There's a whole lot of other things that could be covered and talked about. I think those are kind of like the big, broad brushstrokes that I can talk about while also preserving some privacy. Big thing is have the conversations. Think more logical and factual, no judgment. Act like you're comfortable. Eventually, you'll get comfortable. Fake it till you make it, I guess. And don't forget to talk about sensory preferences, sensory needs, and how all of that impacts how we connect with each other. A lot of times when autistic teenagers are growing up, they are learning how to have relationships. They're learning how to have healthy relationships with others. They're learning what that looks like, and what all the possibilities are. So it's really, really important to keep those lines of communication open so that you can provide that support as you're going along. to be able to answer questions, to be able to talk about relationships they've had or they have, and different things that are happening, to be able to be that sounding board. It's really important. I can't think of anything else that's more important. If you have any questions about neurodivergent intimacy or anything like that that is Facebook appropriate, feel free to drop a comment. Thanks for joining me.